how do you see then that specifically now you get art clubs, which is where you're doing craft, and that is really beneficial to just a general mind dump of relaxation, and that's really, really great. I've even been to art clubs myself. I've been to jewelry making courses, and it really is great if you're a very busy person to just do a numbing activity that is really creative. It's really, really great to do that. But I have noticed specifically doing the technical drawing and painting foundation classes. How have you noticed the benefit in your students of being in a learning environment and not a therapy environment? How have you noticed, what have you noticed the benefits of that are?
Okay, I think, look, I'm a formal, I give formal art lessons. I don't give informal art lessons. So formal art lessons, like you say, fundamentals in fine art, and informal lessons would be just take your paints and splash all over the place and be spontaneous and have a ball. Which is really also very, very good for the person who needs that. But and also I attract a certain kind of personality who like formal education, formal art classes, and because they're serious about their art. They want to take their art to the extent where they can exhibit or even leave their jobs to become full-time artists as such. But what I found, which is absolutely amazing, is that the students who are attending formal art classes can do informal paintings in such a beautiful way, a dynamic way.
Yeah.
And they can get it to the most incredible levels. So I do encourage, once we do the formal, then I introduce a little bit of informal to let the child in, and right-hand side of the brain, which is so important. So it's also cathartic, but then it's also cathartic to people who are technically inclined. So, I think informal art has its place, and so does formal. It depends on one's own journey or where they want to go with the art as such.
Okay, but
I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, the question was, how did the students benefit being in a learning environment as opposed to a therapy session?
Yeah, it's interesting, Justine. Even I found that my students, even when they're in a structured formal art class, it's cathartic. They get the therapy automatic from the stance of they living in that moment. So there's a catharsis there. And yes, some of them, or a lot of them, will go through difficulties, and when there's someone there to show them the way or help them to get the tools to dissolve that or solve their problem, that's also therapeutic for them as well. There's someone to show them, and then they feel very empowered.
Well,
so
to add to what you're saying, I remember, at the time when we were teaching, and it was in 2002, 3? Was it 2003 or 4? Which do you remember? I think it was 2003. And at that time, it was very expensive. I mean, it's I know the expenses really climbed in South Africa, and I remember it really being expensive. I remember rent was at the time, I mean, now it's even quadrupled the price now. The prices in South Africa. And I remember, like, I had to pay 4,000 Rand rent, and my salary was only 6,000 Rand, and stuff like that. And I remember a lot of the students coming there going, well, we don't have time for therapy. We don't have time for self-help things. We don't have time to go and ask someone for help because we just can't afford it. And I remember you pay for a counseling session, it would be £700. So all those people who were just having to get through life, and either they were, working class, middle working class people who were just working day and night, they just couldn't afford to get to a therapist to help in any way. And I remember our students went through a lot. I remember some of the lives that you and I have witnessed, where we've had students whose children were literally opened up the door on the side and their kid was knocked over by a truck and murdered. We've had murders, we've had attacks. It's been really extreme in the experiences that the students experienced. And I remember they would come into class and they'd literally be white as a ghost, and you and I would grab them and we'd go, sit down, focus on your art. You're going to sit down and you're going to do that. That's what you're going to do. And you'd almost grab them and not talk it through and just get them to focus on something. So it's almost like their brain was numb and almost like a deer in headlights, but had been in a deer in headlights for either a couple of weeks, and they just couldn't take the next step or know which way to go. And then after doing the class, nobody was telling them what to do. Nobody was telling them, it's going to be okay, I know how you feel. Nobody was saying, oh, well, you must do this to get better. They literally sat there and just went, I don't want anyone to give me advice. I want to just understand the situation first and almost get out of that shock period. And that I noticed those lessons helped those students do that, on just finding something else to focus on, but not push away what they were working through. And then with working through those art processes helped them just slowly start to understand what they felt they could then use to help them work through it. Because remember, we even worked with children from squatter camps, and there was no ways that people could afford any form of counseling or therapy from squatter camps. So it was, what could we do that was another alternative to just help us get our brains insane? I mean, to the viewers out there, we heard stories every day from people being murdered just for a mobile phone, to houses being smoked in, and then they were put on drugs, and then they come in the houses and they either cut the people's Achilles heel or they murder them just for a couple of hijackings, all this stuff. So and when I'm speaking about it now in the UK, you and I speak about it as if it's just a normal thing. But when you're speaking to people out there, when we talk about crime, we're talking about the severity of the crime. And the severity is just something you can't put your mind around. You can't get your head around. It's a very different form of crime that is in South Africa. So in the UK, there's a lot more accountability and a lot more consequence. And, there's a lot stricter things in place. Yes, there's crime. So when people say, we've been mugged or we've had our house broken into, the thought behind the brokening process is not to go and murder that person if I'm going to break into their car and steal something, because you'd even have people waiting at their house for them to come home to murder them. So it was really extreme on the cases that you and I worked with, unbeknown to ourselves. And for us, this was normal. It was a normal day-to-day experience. You just got on with it. You just got on with life. It was the normal thing. When you'd hear gunshots or people pulling out guns, attacking each other, or gangs setting up to get people in that area to shoot them out to see how quickly they could do it, it was a normal thing. So people were trying to find a way to just get through that, what was supposed to be accepted as a normal day-to-day experience, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the one student, they lost millions through their business. And they had decided to go to Singapore to establish a new section in their business. And while that happened, they realized that one of the business partners had double-crossed them and cost them millions. And I remember the student saying, look, I've got to go back to South Africa to look after my house, you know, just to see that everything is safe, and also just to take a break. The first thing she did as she arrived in the house, she phoned me. She says, I'm back. When can I start art? And I remember her husband phoning her from Singapore and saying, where are you? She says, I'm in art class. He said, but I thought you were going to fix up the house. She said, yes, I am. But I thought I'd, you know, attend art classes as well. And I was very sensitive to her emotional state at that stage, very aware of what she was going through. And it was just so lovely that she could just sit, be in a very safe, sanctuary type environment and just focus on something other than her problems at that time. And she did admit a couple of weeks ago, she says, you know, art classes has pulled her through some really traumatic times in her life.
Yeah.
And then she broke her ankle, and then she was hospitalized because she had to have a spine op. And once again, with her lying flat on her back for many, many weeks, she kept on saying, I've got to get back to art, and I'd like to do double the amount of classes just so that I can become sane again.
Yes. And
so, yeah, it becomes a powerful tool.